Since they moved here, Florida is getting worse. And so today, I'm super fired up to have my friend Kevin, who you can find on YouTube at Kevin 24/7. Um, I specifically, well, there it is, yeah. But I specifically invited him onto this video because he recently moved to Florida, and he moved here for a reason. And for the last, and I'll let him tell a story. I don't want to jump on his toes here, but his experience has been similar to what a lot of people think right now, which is that it's only getting worse. And so, with that in mind, Kevin, I'll give you the floor here. Why'd you move to Florida?
Oh man, it was a tough choice. It was really hard. The biggest challenge we faced was which beach did we want to live near. But ultimately, we moved to Florida for three main reasons. Number one being the old saying, "Happy wife, happy life." My wife wanted to move to Florida, so we were like, let's make that happen. Let's be closer to the beach. Let's enjoy the Emerald Gulf Coast is where we're at, Northwest Florida. Number two, it was 2021 that we were actually considering this, and then 2022 is where we really put the plan into motion, and we saw the writing on the wall, and that was this is going to be our best opportunity to make the most amount of money possible selling our home in Atlanta before coming down to Florida. It was a great opportunity. And number three is we could have moved anywhere for the fact that we work remotely, online, and we create content. And Florida just aided and lended to a much better opportunity to have even more beautiful scenery and opportunities to create. It was a no brainer.
Yeah. Well, that's what a lot of people have found. And I mean, there's 1,400 people who moved to Florida right now, as of today. That's the most current stat, right? So the myth that people are not moving to Florida or that they're migrating out of Florida is just not, it's not true. But I'm
Not to
curious about
mention,
one thing.
not to
Well,
mention
let me
the
ask.
added.
We're talking. Um, so you mentioned you were in Atlanta. So you mentioned that the you were selling your home. You were pretty excited about the fact that you could max out the value of the home. And I don't know what the market looks like now, but it's possible you could have potentially made some more. I'm curious, what was the Atlanta vibe at that point? I mean, was there? I know in Chicago, there's a lot of folks that are, they feel trapped. California, they feel trapped. There's the homelessness, there's the crime, there's the drugs. What was it like? Was that part of the Atlanta story or not so much?
Whew. That's a tough question because honestly, and I don't want to avoid answering your question, but I forgot to mention that uh, Florida provides zero state income tax, so that was another added perk for us coming here. But as far as the vibe in Atlanta, I'm gonna be honest with you, Chris. The vibe is whatever you want it to be. Okay. And we never allowed ourselves to be put in any position to ever be a part of a vibe. No, like StreamYard started playing this song in my headphones. Like I can't stop it from playing. It's this really stupid song, like testing the audio for StreamYard. Anyway, we never allowed ourselves to be put in a position to be affected by any vibe. Now, granted,
Just
this
so
could
you know
also.
what just happened, that was AI. They are trying to change the narrative right now.
I
They are
know.
trying to manipulate your story. They're trying to censor you, Kevin.
Right when you said
Don't
it,
let them do that to you.
I got a phone call. The audio started messing up. But honestly though, the vibe was shifting. Okay. Now, according to mainstream media, the vibe was shifting. We were seeing what was going on in the news, all sorts of craziness and violence that's happening all over. And it was happening in Atlanta too. We had a few jobs that we were actually doing because we were still in construction mode during that time. And one of which was downtown Atlanta, right by a Wendy's that they set on fire. And they were trying to make it seem like, somebody did it. But honestly, I think that this was a paid actor when it was all said and done. But we were looking at it like, we're going to move, we're going to continuously move towards a better lifestyle. And I think that's what we accomplished here in the particular area that we chose to move to in Florida.
Yeah. So I know that you have a daughter. What, and I know she's in middle school.
Oh yeah. She thinks she's
So
grown, but she's middle school.
what was was there any, because I don't, I full disclosure, I almost moved to Georgia. I actually I went shopping. This is now going back like 15, 20 years ago, maybe more. I'm old. But I had shopped in Buckhead. I was looking around in certain areas just kind of outside of Atlanta that I thought were really cool. And I almost pulled the trigger on one of them. I didn't, obviously. I stayed in Florida. But at the time I was like, man, this is really unique. It's kind of eclectic. I really enjoyed the vibe there. And recently, when I visited, it didn't feel like that anymore. So I didn't feel that same compulsion.
We really like Midtown. We really like Midtown, and we even considered getting a condo in Midtown and potentially going and moving down there. But uh, with children, no way, not possible. And with the school system, the Atlanta Public School system or Fulton County Schools, doesn't matter. Not gonna happen. It's a terrible choice in my opinion. I would never move into it. I would only be interested in moving out of it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people seem to agree with you, and that's why we've got such a big push for people coming here. But a lot of people are concerned about the fact that they feel like it's getting worse. And so you're on the opposite side of the state of me. You're in a completely different market than I'm in. And we compare notes on that often. But the area that you picked, I'm curious, was there, I know that you do your shopping, I know you do your due diligence. What brought you, or why did you land there in particular versus some other places in Florida?
Our first choice was actually Pensacola Beach, and Pensacola Beach is beautiful. However, again, not really conducive to raising a now teenager going through school. So we kind of put that to the side, and we decided, hey, let's focus on the best beach with the best school in Northwest Florida. Basically, we even considered your side of Florida too. I think Pompano Beach was a consideration, but we just always come to the Gulf. We've always come to Northwest Florida for vacation, and we just really like it here. It was a quick and simple, easy drive back to Atlanta, where family is. Um, but the school system was really the driving force, and we looked anywhere from Panama City Beach all the way to Pensacola proper. Pensacola proper is not going to happen. It's not our scene, and so we ended up in the middle. Almost ended up in Navarre, but we ended up in the middle in Destin. And I think it was a great choice, great schools, great people, great beach, great opportunity, but also an hour in any direction, and we can be anywhere else we want to be.
Yeah, you got a lot of options. So you mentioned the school system, and I want to talk about that because right now, as everybody knows, we're going into election season. And right now, Ron DeSantis is getting a lot of heat for lots of different things. And we've talked about this off camera uh, about, in many different ways. So I'm not going to retread some of the things that we talked about, but I'm curious about, a lot of people are afraid. And a lot of people right now are getting very vocal about the fact that DeSantis has put some barriers, some laws in place that won't allow certain types of education. And that all falls under a thing called Don't Say Gay, which is not what it's about whatsoever. It's not mentioned in the legislation whatsoever. It does, it's actually written into law that Black history must be taught, but it doesn't allow for critical race theory. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts of that, or thoughts about that, or an experience with that. What do you think?
I'm gonna be honest with you. My experience is that a lot of people have no idea what the hell's going on, and they will only have thoughts and opinions based on what they're told. And the media continuously lies and tells these lies for which people then believe.
The media lies?
I mean, you may edit that out of your video. I don't know. You might get some
No.
censorship from the platform, but at the end
We
of the
got to be
day,
real careful about what we talk about here.
it's the silliest thing, and it's like, just think about it. Like, as you said, don't say gay. That's not really what it is. Okay, that's just what they decided to call it. Okay, why? Because it gets people talking. It gets people excited. It gets people emotional. It gets response and reaction engagement out of them. Right? Much like the Inflation Reduction Act. You want to tell me how much of a reduction that proposal, that bill is going to actually provide towards inflation? Zero. And in fact, they said it could potentially cause inflation to go up. But at the end of the day, the people hear what they want them to hear, okay? Which ultimately means they're going to think what they want them to think. Now, the whole Ron DeSantis thing and against black people and black history, look, it's called clickbait. It's called reading between the lines. It's called half truths. Because yeah, sure, Ron DeSantis has had issues with some curriculum around AP Black History as it relates to um, oh man, as it related to, what was it? Something to do with homosexuality and queer studies and different things like that. And it's like, is this really what we need in AP Black History? No, it's not Ron DeSantis against black people. It's not Ron DeSantis trying to erase black history. And in fact, it was just make some modifications to it and it will be approved and pushed through and you can continue on as you were. But depending on who's going to read the story or promote it or publish it on their website or their blog or their YouTube channel, whatever it may be, whose attention they're trying to grab, what type of response they're trying to trigger, or potentially even better yet, what votes they're trying to gain is going to be how it's presented. And unfortunately, the people suffer the most because they're just lied to and manipulated continuously.
Well, what's really kind of concerning to me, not kind of, what's terrifying to me is that I have noticed, and this particular channel has been threatened because some of my comments have been deemed to be flagged as hateful by somebody who watched it. And I almost lost the platform. And I may at some point lose the platform, which is why I encourage everybody to follow me on Twitter. And you'll always be able to find me there. I'll always comment back there because I love that dialogue. In fact, what I really think is the most important thing that we can bring back into the schools is debate, because in the real world, not everybody gets along and not everybody has the same opinion. But I think it's really important to be able to express your ideas, your ideologies, your philosophies, your beliefs, and be able to defend them, not physically, but be able to articulate them in a way and have someone else do the exact same. And then make it so, as an audience member watching that debate, I then would be able to listen to both sides of the argument and decide for myself which pieces of truth do I accept. And so that open dialogue that used to be prevalent, at least when I went to school and I took debate, that was what you did. Today, that doesn't exist. And what's more scary is that it doesn't exist on these platforms anymore. So if you aren't toting the party line that they want you to, you could be shadow banned, you could be demonetized, you can be thrown off, you could be labeled any new, you could be, and even more concerning is some of the laws, and I don't have the one on, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but they're trying to alter what a domestic terrorist is. And I think that goes back to the Patriot Act. It might be some different legislation, but I know that there's a push right now across many platforms. So if you read the terms of service in YouTube, you'll find that they've changed radically here recently. But the government itself is also trying to get control of what domestic terrorism is. And that could, again, this is worst case scenario, but that could broadly be applied. You're at a PTA meeting, you don't agree with what's being talked about in the school system, you raise your hand to share whatever your opinion is or whatever your belief system is, and it's not in vogue. And now you're a domestic terrorist. And then you get deplatformed and censored. That's terrifying.
Well, you said it. You said it so accurately, and it's a manipulation, okay? And the manipulation was, we saw this, we witnessed this last year as they manipulated the definition and the calculated method of determining a recession. Why? Because it didn't look good. It wasn't aligning with what they wanted, so they just manipulated what the truth was, okay? Now, we've also seen, I'm gonna get to the debate here too in a minute, where you can't have a debate.
Yeah.
But we've also seen, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but there was a particular reporter that would go to the White House briefings. He would be polite, he would send emails, he would raise his hand, he would never get the opportunity to speak, he would never get any questions ever answered that he would email. And when he actually was finally fed up about it and spoke up, everyone in the room converged on him and tried to force him out. And this ties into why we can't have debates, because there's two sides here. I'm going to say there's one side that you and I are on, and that side, we know how to debate. We know how to communicate. We know how to have discussions and bring fact and a certain judgment, and even see both sides of the story, potentially even alter and change our opinions based on information, logical information shared. The other side, there's no debate. The only debate that you can have is the one that they want you to have about topics that are completely fucked up. Okay. So if you want to debate on whether or not, the flag should be red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, or inversed, okay, fine. That's cool. If you want to debate about whether or not Target should put the little boys bathing suit with the tuck feature to hide their junk, out front
Oh,
or on the register end cap, you can have that debate. The debate will not exist of whether or not that should even be a product. The only debate that you can have is the one that aligns with any push towards what they want to manipulate. If your debate goes against that, there's no argument, there's no discussion. What'll happen is you'll end up like this platform here, and you'll be silenced. You'll be silenced. The only time that you can ever have an opinion is if that opinion aligns with the push that they want.
which sounds to me like a slow play to censorship and lack of freedom of speech, which is terrifying.
It's definitely a lack of freedom of speech. And the freedom of speech is going to be pushed off onto other platforms, Twitter, Rumble. That's going to inherently have its own problems, because it's going to be the wild, wild west of freedom of speech, for which the masses are going to be pummeled by freedom of speech misinformation, in addition to freedom of speech of stolen content that you create, that you spend tons of time, effort, energy, hours, resources, money towards creating, that other people will steal and use on these platforms, and stand behind this shield of freedom of speech while they're monetizing your content. We've already seen this. Now, I don't know if you've seen it, but my wife and I, we've already done our studies and our research, and we've seen it happening. And this freedom of speech is actually going to be like, the straw that breaks the camel's back, because everyone is so confused and misled and manipulated into what they think is real. They have no idea.
Well, what's crazy is what you just mentioned just happened to me recently, and I know it's happened to you in the past, where somebody took the audio from one of my videos on a different channel and then created their own piece of content, which is monetized and gaining an audience. And I'm not capitalizing on that. I'm not participating in that. And being it was the first time, to me, it was novel. And I'm like, well, that's cool. Somebody, it's almost like validation. what is the old saying that imitation is the highest form of flattery? I was like, oh man, this is cool. In fact, if you remember, I called you. I'm like, this is exciting. You're like, wait, it's not so exciting if that got like 10 million views and you're not participating in it. You're losing out on revenue, and that's it. It was cool the first time. It won't be cool the second time.
And honestly, what makes it worse is this new freedom of speech where they'll be able to take and manipulate your content through their own uh, editing software or using AI and make you say whatever they want you to say. And most of society will just take it for face value and believe it.
Which then propels how do you find the truth and how do you determine what's real? And that can only be done, in my opinion, by someone who is diligent and paying attention and committed to seeking whatever that truth is. And so right now, I'm watching the media attack DeSantis. And Disney is the biggest target that DeSantis has gone after, right? So just recently, Disney came out and Bob Iger essentially blamed Ron DeSantis for Disney's failure. But the truth is, they've been hemorrhaging cash to the tunes of billions of dollars. They've lost, I think, 300 million subscribers on their platform, the paid subscription platform, Disney Plus, because of the woke stuff that they're promoting that the public does not want, right? So the
Oh
market
my
is
gosh.
saying we don't want this. They don't want it. We don't trust you to teach our kids the right values. So we're going to pivot to something else, which is a free market choice. And I think that's what should be encouraged, free market capitalism. But the fact that they're pulling out of this $1 billion center that they were building in Orlando to uh, to what was it? It was for their employees. Well, they pulled the plug on that. It had nothing to do. In fact, it was decided in November of last year when they were reviewing. It was a business decision based on them hemorrhaging cash. But well, that's not a good thing to share. Instead, let's just blame DeSantis. This is him, and let's get him out of contention, and let's get Trump, who gets a lot more eyeballs, a lot more views. The media makes a lot more money off of him than they ever will with DeSantis. So let's get the guy who's the low hanging fruit out of the way. And we don't want Trump to win, but we definitely want to monetize and capitalize on the attention that he's guaranteed to bring. And so that's just one of the tip of the iceberg that I can go into in terms of changing the narrative. But that's the truth.
You know, the real truth that you just described here is that somehow, somewhere along here recently, these businesses, these corporations have lost sight of capitalism. And they're making business decisions based on a ridiculous assumption that this particular group, this demographic, this alphabet bunch could potentially have a big enough impact on them to support them. And not only did they prove that to be wrong and inaccurate and false, they've also then alienated and put off their true supporters that were paying into Disney Plus and buying
Pop
tickets and
open your Bud Light, Kevin. Let's go. It's Bud Light time. Let's go.
I don't have a Bud Light. I'm gonna go. I got Perrier today.
I don't either, but it doesn't matter. The truth is not real. Bud
You know,
Light, Monster, same shit. Let's go.
it's like, uh, and then you got to sit back and you got to look, and it's like, I can't believe this didn't work out. Look, I don't have anything against anybody, really. Even those people who would prefer to come and burn a cross in my front yard and wear hoods. I don't even care. Do what you do. That's on you. But at the end of the day, it's like, why don't we just like focus on what we're really trying to do? Disney, be a business. What do businesses do? They make money. Okay, don't try to be everything to everybody, and at that point, you're not being everything to everybody. You know, we don't need to rewrite movies and scripts and change every character. But you got to think, as Disney, you have the ability to create anything you want. Just make a whole new character, make a whole new storyline. That would have been far better decision than pissing off, hundreds of years of loyal fans that, are like, why did you just do that?
Well, that's a long way of saying what I say all the time on my channel, which is the market is always right. And the market doesn't care what I think about price, what you think about price, what a home buyer or seller, actually, what a home seller thinks about price. But the market, that same analogy applies to every business too. The market is going to tell you what is right, and then you have the opportunity to pivot and govern yourself accordingly. And I think there's now Disney is such a monstrous beast of revenue generation that I think they'll be fine. And the company that owns Budweiser is such a massive, not monopoly, but it's so big, it's so well capitalized that they have the wherewithal to withstand whatever the controversy is. And I think over time, they'll be fine too. But the smaller businesses that make these poor decisions will be out of business. And so really it's being aware of your business and how you can best serve and support your client and give them what they want, not what you want based on whatever your ideology is, because we're going into a massive recession. And if you do not, the strong will survive, the nimble and flexible will survive, but people who are not either of those two things are going to be out of business. And that's what the government wants. They want you on their teat. And there's going to be a lot of folks that are on that teat. But by the way, here's the problem. The government has no money. You can't be on there. You can't be on their teat. So what does that mean when they got the control and they got you on their teat? Well, they'll print some more money. Okay, cool. Well, the debt ceiling and I mean, just look at the thing that hasn't happened yet that nobody's talking about. The only way to fund this is through higher taxes.
Well, all right. So when you talk about ideology, I don't think that what Disney did was their ideology, and that's the problem. They were chasing a trend. Okay, they were chasing the possibility of potentially gaining and losing drastically. But Disney,
I
Anheuser,
disagree because I think before Iger got in there, I do think it was the ideology. I do think it was the culture. I do think that's what they were looking to push. And it was rejected so badly that they got rid of whoever was in charge and they brought in the old school Bob Iger. And Bob Iger made some hard business decisions, but he's also smart enough to play the game the right way. And he's got an agenda. And so for him to go after DeSantis is it right or wrong? It doesn't matter. It's what he's doing, and he's capitalizing on that opportunity. But I think you're right. Um, I don't believe it is Iger's ideology anymore. It's his. He is concerned about profits and shareholders and making money, and that was not the case up until he came back in.
yeah, but then the other thing is on the flip side, you got to think Disney, Anheuser Busch, to have the ability to lose billions in market share, that says a lot. So, talking to your point about having the wherewithal to be able to withstand this problem and recover, they're going to be one of the few that can pull that off. Some of these smaller businesses, not likely. But even more importantly, we got two things to discuss here. Number one, who's going to pay for all this? Okay, higher taxes, yeah, sure. But we've never really been concerned with paying for it before. We just print more money or push more buttons on the computer now with this digital currency. But then additionally, what people really need to focus on is it's not just a small business that makes a poor decision. It's how big business, is how government can impact small business. For instance, people thinking to themselves and saying to themselves, oh, I'm not concerned with corporate real estate. I'm not concerned with commercial real estate failing. It doesn't affect me.
Well, That's not true because, I've covered this a lot on the channel, but there are so many investment funds and pension funds and mutual funds and investment vehicles that are directly tied to the performance of those debts and the securitization of those buildings. And when those buildings fail, which they are, it's happening as we speak, well, then all of those um, investors get hurt dramatically when those businesses are now sold, or when those buildings are now sold at pennies on the dollar. And so the biggest example of that is the one in San Francisco, which I want to say in 2019 was valued at 600 million, and they can't sell it for 60 today because there's no market. All of those land or all of those building owners, um, they get short-term mortgages. They get short-term financing, right? So you don't get a 30-year fix on a huge commercial building. You get a short-term paper. And so when they did that, when they were capitalized and were valued back in 2019, the market was very different, and the interest rate market was very different. And so they played the game up until the interest rate tightening cycle changed, and now the tightening cycle is such that it's not easy to refinance. Nobody's refinancing at those same rates. So you're seeing those companies go, or you're seeing those buildings essentially get fire sailed by the bank, and the bank doesn't want to be in the real estate business. So they're going to sell it for pennies on the dollar. Someone will make a fortune on that, but the pension holders and the investment holders of that debt, whether they know it or not, are going to get decimated. And when that happens, and it will happen, I don't know when, I just know it will. When that happens, the only person that can, or the only thing that can prevent civil war or civil unrest, because I can promise you, you work 60 years and paid into a pension, and now you find out it's not what you thought it was, there will be civil unrest. Well, the government will step in and they'll print more money. So right now we're talking about the debt ceiling, but the next quantitative easing, or not quantitative, the next bailout that they have is going to be multi trillions of dollars.
I
What
think
happens to our currency?
I think a lot of people are not necessarily focusing on what the biggest problem is. Everybody's being distracted by a crash. They're waiting for a housing market crash, they're waiting for the automotive industry crash, not realizing that the crash is actually going to be some some crash that they're not even closely, most majority of people are not even tied into, like commercial corporate real estate, that is ultimately going to be that first domino that pushes the rest of it over, where if, which will wipe out jobs, it'll wipe out employment, it'll wipe out pensions, it'll wipe out retirement, it'll wipe out people's ability to stay in their homes, and they'll be forced out. And then you add on top of that the questionability of our currency, the country's credit score with the rest of the world, and this debt default. um, it's going to get ugly.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I get, and it's funny, I get heat about this now, but I'm committed to telling the truth about what's happening in the housing market today. I also talk about all of the things that we just talked about, and all of to me, they're obvious. I was a stockbroker for 20 years. I watched these things happen during the great financial crisis. I remember when WAMU went, when there was a bank run. I remember when they got shut down. And right now the banking system itself is teetering on insolvency. And so when the next 20 banks fail, and they will, I just don't know when, and people are afraid that their money's not safe, so they go to pull their money. I did this video in the liquidity crisis piece of content that I put out about a year ago, but all these things are predictable. So there is no distressed market for housing right now in Florida at all. It's statistically insignificant, but there is tremendous distress on the consumer right now. And that is only worsening as every day goes by. So, inflation, they can tell you it's doing better. It's not, it's out of control. Employment, they can tell you it's doing better. It's not, it's out of control. But when those banks fail and people don't trust the system and they go to pull their money, which will, I mean, it's predictable, it will happen, but the bank can't give you your money back. That's when everything just goes to shit. And
You
it has
know,
to.
so I think that it's my gut feeling that JP Morgan Chase is going to be the end all be all before it switches over to a central bank, and we'll see the end of private
Oh,
banks.
so let me jump in. So JP Morgan Chase is the same thing as the government.
Exactly.
Um, so if they consolidate the sector and all the banks fail and it comes down to two or three big players, the big fear that I have is not that we have a digital currency, which people are talking about right now. Everybody's afraid of that. What I'm more concerned about is the government to have control and access of the ledger. So the currency itself isn't the big deal. It's the government having control of the ledger of what goes on in those transactions. Because if they're able to use the crisis, which nobody wants to leave a good crisis
Don't let it go to
unturned,
waste.
right? Yeah, don't waste a good crisis. The fear that I have isn't that there will be digital currency, because digital currency by itself is just another form of currency. But if the government ever gets control of the ledger, whether that be JP Morgan or the Treasury itself, if we ever get conned into that, because there is a crisis and everybody's afraid, worse, they're panicked and they say, yeah, oh, well, if we do this, and the government will give us, I don't know, $2,000 for doing it or $5,000 for doing it or whatever the incentive is to do it. And everybody jumps on that ledger. Well, then it's over. Now we have a social credit score. Now they have all the power. Now they can control what if they choose to, which again yet to be determined. But if they want to operate like the United States of China, they can, and they can command whatever you buy and sell and do whatever with. Period. That's my biggest fear.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then you would see instances where they're going to start. We've already heard of the expiration dates and the mandates and the limits set on central bank digital currencies or whatever digital currency they choose or whatever they want to call it. The negative interest rates. I mean, I could even see them going as far as saying, if you want to drive your vehicle, we'll just deduct your account for the emissions that you're producing on this vehicle. I mean, they're already collecting the data that they need to create this social credit score based on, their what their guidelines, what they deem acceptable to be, which now we get back into that topic of debate, which they won't allow you to have at that point. But um, there's a lot going on here. One of the big problems that we have, and you'll probably attest to, is that when you try to speak the truth, that is ultimately the unpopular truth, that is ultimately going against the narrative of what everyone else is propagating and throwing out there for clicks and views, you appear to be the liar. Unfortunately, they don't trust you because what you're saying doesn't align with what everyone else is saying, although everything you're saying makes sense. And I've been trying to tell people for the longest, like, forget the money, forget the money. You need assets. You need assets because they can control the money, they can control the ledger, they can control the banks, but at least for now, we still have full control over assets. Now, granted, we're not going to go out and go to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread with, ounces of gold. But if we look back through history, what has stood the test of time? What continuously is of value? What do they make movies about? Trying to find treasure and, stashes of pirates, gold. Like, that's what's always remained. But at the end of the day, it comes down to assets. If you're stuck on this financial system and the banks control you, the governments control you, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and the thing that, to address what you just said about people not believing me, or I'm not tell or not just me, anybody telling the truth, well, that's not popular, so we don't believe it. Just go and look at other countries. In other countries, you can only drive a car on certain days. In certain countries, you only get power, electricity to your house during certain hours. In other countries, you're only allowed to buy certain things based on what they tell you.
Yeah, they get power all the time. They can drive and fly their jets all the time, but everyone
Right.
else,
Right. So The pivot then is, okay, well, what are the things that you can control to protect yourself in the event those things happen? Well, I am a real estate professional, and this is not a pitch that you should buy a house with me immediately. Never do anything for anybody other than yourself, and only do what's right for you. However, until things change, which I'm praying that it never gets to a point where the government just, I mean, forgetting about eminent domain laws and stuff like that, you can still own property, right? So they aren't making any more land. And one of the things that I think insulates my market different to other places is the fact that there is no more land to develop. So there are markets that exist right now in different places that are going to be more insulated than other places. And I think Florida is more protected. Certain markets, certainly within Florida, are more protected from the crash that eventually will happen. But make no mistake, when the markets crash, everybody's going to get hit, right? But if you own land and you can hold that land, and when I say land, when you own property, which is attached to land, um, you own that. And if you can withstand that storm over time, the market does what it does, and you will have an appreciating asset at some point in the future. So buying property is not an idiot decision. It's actually a great decision, but make sure you're aware of what the market conditions are so that you can obviously get the best deal possible given your needs.
Well, if you want to talk about the other upsides and perks to buying property specifically in the state of Florida, you got to think that Florida has one of the strongest economies, not in the country, but in the world. Okay. In addition to a strong legislative and political force that is against, it opposes the current administration, and, in my opinion, would go so far as to introduce its own currency, as it's already introduced bills to ban central bank digital currency in this state. So it just adds to the list of reasons why I would more so want to be in Florida than I already am now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the number one export from Florida, I think, is freedom. And I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so let's talk a little bit about the market up by you, because I know we're in very different markets, and I highlight what's going on in every market here. So Boca Del Rey, Boynton Beach numbers just came out in my market, and we're seeing some volatility in terms of pricing between average and median sales price. But we've seen this. This is nothing new. So we see some upticks and some downticks. But Fort Walton Beach, I know you're um, thinking about buying, but you haven't really made that decision as to where you want to be. So, what does that look like for you?
Well, just full disclaimer, I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a real estate professional. I'm just some guy who makes YouTube videos sitting in his kitchen wearing these Hawaiian these tropical shirts that my wife buys me. But we have
Aloha.
always yeah, we've always watched the market, and real estate has always been really good to us. And so when we came to Florida, we were like, all right, one, we don't know if we're going to stay, and that was actually predicated on our daughter wanting to be here. She's given us the blessing, so we're here to stay. And then now it's, do we want a house? Do we want a condo? Do we want a beach? Do we want the bay? Do we want inland? What do we want? Um, but we continuously watch, and I think I have a pretty good, you know, uh, I can kind of judge the market based on the media, based on having conversations with professionals like yourself, talking to lenders. I got a good friend at New American Funding, and we talk on a regular basis, and just kind of seeing when's the right time, what's the best move. And we're not in a hurry either. So I personally feel as though we can potentially see greater opportunities for better deals down the road. But even still during this time frame, we're still not even sure what we want. I think we've decided to buy a house, standalone house, and we're just going to do that. We're going to go down that route. And ultimately, after we have that house, we will probably buy a condo for an income property, but not solely for an income property. It'll just be something that we can have that's on the beach without trying to live on the beach. So
Yeah.
we'll just have short term rentals subsidizing that for us. Um, but I asked you to provide us with your take from your having ability to have insight to the data through MLS and your other resources, just to kind of see like what we see, what we feel, how does it compare to the numbers on the back end? And I was actually surprised at what you sent.
Yeah, well, I'll actually pop that in and we can go over it a little bit together. But I did want to talk about something that I'm actually considering, and I don't know if you know this, but it turns out I did some of the, what is it? The ancestry testing. And for years, I've known that I'm black with white freckles. It might not be obvious to everyone. I know that you've met me, so you know that. But with that in mind, I'm thinking about moving to California because it's my understanding that because of course I am of color, that I will be entitled to some reparations up to 1.2 million per resident. Um, for all the things that have happened in the past.
Well,
So, any comments on that?
I think that was one of the things that really attracted me to that drew me to you last year when we first met, and I was like, I think there's something special about Chris. But and then then we even had an opportunity to hang out in California last year. Uh, Great place to be, especially if they're going to pay you to be black. So
Yeah,
and I think the key here is that if we're going to travel down this road, if we're going to go down this path and align with this agenda, this push, I think it's only fair that you have the ability to identify as black and collect that check. That's the only thing that makes sense.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I've got your vote.
Got one vote.
I'll- and in the comments down below, let me. Oh, well, actually, and not on these. Follow me on Twitter. Leave your comment down there and let me know whether I'm black or not, because I identify that way when it comes to getting my million.
Let me just put it out there because this is not my channel. My audience tends to completely gloss over my sarcasm. I'm fucking with y'all.
I'm going to go on the record here also. Me too.
Yeah. It's like somehow it doesn't come through. It doesn't translate. I'm fucking with y'all. Like,
oh God! If you've made it this far,
yeah.
congratulations.
But no doubt. Like I've even said it on my videos. I said, look, what these people don't realize, what they don't understand, is that if this actually happens, if this actually comes to fruition, I would be worried. I would be scared. If I received a check for $1.2 million for being black in California, you ought to know that like there's going to be some serious consequences on the other end that are stacked against you so that that money could then be it's another form of money laundering that the government does. Like, I don't know.
There's no such thing as free lunch. So,
This,
yeah.
Gavin Newsom's using the whole thing as a political stunt to make it look like he's trying to do something, only to eventually say, "Oh, nothing could be done. Sorry, I tried. Can I have your vote still?" Like, I don't know how people aren't like realizing what's going on.
People, well, so I said it in my last video, in politics, especially, whoever tells the biggest lie wins. And we have to be smarter than that because there's no such thing as you getting 1.2 million. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as a free anything. And the more they can get control of us, the more they have control, the more we're fucked. But with that in mind,
well, just last little piece on this is like, think
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
How much did they give out in CARES Act stimulus checks from the pandemic? Right. The numbers that I'm seeing on this black reparations is multiple trillions of dollars. Where are we today considering the impacts of that printed money, then applying that and projecting into the future of where we would be if they actually decided to do that? Like, here's 1.2 million, but your cost of living just increased by 300%. Like,
So I think the big equalizer here, and I think this is going to be a major topic, a talking point as we move forward, is are we better off today than we were 4 years ago? Are we better off today than we were 8 years ago? Are we better off today than at any other point going back in history? And govern ourselves accordingly and make choices based on what's true and none of this nonsense. Because the truth is, there are plenty of smart folks out there. There are plenty of content creators out there. There are plenty of government officials out there that are actually speaking the truth in terms of what is likely to, or maybe not government officials, economists, market analysts. There are a lot of smart people that are sharing what's happening right now and the risks that are inherent with the choices that we're making. And when I was a stockbroker, I talked about it in real time. And people often ask me, what was I telling my clients way back then? I told them the same thing I'm telling people now, which is that the moves that we're making on a policy or from a governmental perspective, the bailouts, the money printing, the stimulus, all the things that we've done to disable free market capitalism are a disaster, and we are going to pay for it in the future. But we keep kicking that can down the road. We do not let the market play itself out. We don't let businesses fail. We don't let industries fail. We don't let people fail. We don't let we don't let the market do what's right. We let the government do what they think is right so they can continue to have power and control. And that's not going to end well. It's just not going to. So, yeah, that's my 2 thoughts on that. Two
Yeah,
cents on that.
I mean, there's a saying, I don't know, like cut off the thumb to save the hand or something like that. And our
Cut the
government,
pinky to save the arm.
there you go. It's the government is like they're incapable of actually making the tough choices. So they then kick the can down the road, and people don't really realize just how bad it's going to get when you can no longer do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a lot of research to find out what it looks like in other countries who have played that game. So go back and just do a little bit of research and see how these things have worked out in other places. In the big superpowers that were the dominant markets and centers of influence, all of them eventually came to an end. And if we look at places where they stimulated the economy and had hyperinflation, like Argentina and other places like it, look at what those places are like today. That's what we're in for. And so we're going to have to make hard choices. We're going to have to get back to being a United States of America. And we're going to have to do the unpopular thing. And either we do that on our own and it will be really painful, or somebody else does it for us, like Russia or China or I don't know who. But that's what happens.
So how do we get back to being united, a United States of America, when people are being lied to and led to believe that they actually want division and they want black people out of Florida? They're urging and warning black people not to travel to Florida. How do we get to united when the news is perpetuating this lie of division?
Well, I think the only way, first of all, I'm a firm believer of the idea that I can only control what I can control, right? So, what can I do on a daily basis to control what's around me? Well, I can speak the truth. I can share what I see happening in real time. I can use my experience. And again, I'm not an analyst. I'm not an economist. I'm not a politician. I'm not an orthodontist. I'm not a gynecologist. Lots of things that I'm not. But I was a stockbroker for 20 years. I am a real estate professional. I do have some experience, in life, and I just tell the truth. And so I think the more people, I think you mentioned the AI coming in and creating different content and the risks that are inherent with that. I don't think that a chat GPT model can clone the truth or my experience. Period. I think they might get some bullshit talking points, but I think the more people that stand up and tell the truth, like you do it all the time on your channel, which is one of the reasons I admire you so much. I do it on my channel. it's the same thing. And there are other people that are out there doing the same thing. Some of them are getting thrown off the platform. They reemerge someplace else. But it's the old saying, the truth will set us free. Well, that's the that's the brass tacks of where we're at. At some point, the truth will set us free. But the truth is not what people want to hear. At some point, it becomes too big to deny, and then you got to deal with the consequences or suffer them on someone else's terms.
Well, you're 100% right. I appreciate the compliment for the channel. And also, this is about investing, whether it's real estate, whether it's stocks, whether it's anything that you're going to get involved in today that is potentially going to set you up for tomorrow. It's about investing. Now, we're not going to go into great detail on your investment, but obviously you have a strategy moving forward that's going to put you in a new stratosphere when it comes to real estate, and your business growth is going to be insane. But at the same time, I do believe that you're 100% right, and that not everybody is listening to the truth that you're sharing today. But when that time comes where it clicks, you're going to be ahead of the game. You're going to have so much of a library behind you that you've been saying this for all along. Eventually, we're going to see that cycle, and people like you are going to be on top. And the problem, quite possibly, and this is just a super simple concept to grasp, is I was told before by some very smart people, try to avoid telling people things that affects them that they can't change in less than 3 minutes. They don't like that. They don't like getting the truth. Although bad news, it's the truth, but they can't fix it. And I think that's where we are. The truth, people don't want to hear, and they can't change it very quickly. But they know that it's out there, but you'll be looked at as the bad guy for telling them. But keep doing what you're doing,
Well,
because it's very
so
valuable.
I appreciate that, and you do the same. So absolutely check out Kevin's channel. But I will say this: I have learned from personal experience that I personally can, no matter what the thing might be or whatever the problem is, you can make a decision to change instantly. And so once you've made that decision, doesn't mean everybody's going to believe you or trust you, or you've got any credibility behind that decision, because you got to earn that. But you can make a decision immediately to change everything in your life if you choose to. Which then brings me to the topic that I never thought I was going to suggest. But if you are interested in me potentially creating content on how to capitalize in real estate, on investing, on really any other thing, as the markets continue to do what they're doing, leave that in the comments on Twitter, and let me know, because that's something I may consider doing in the future. But at no point will I ever allow myself to be victimized by the quote unquote system, market, economy, nothing. And I know you're the same way, Kevin, and I know that you do some of this on your channel. So definitely check out Kevin's channel too. He's got all kinds of content and courses built out. Um, I'm not trying to step on his feet. I would do it completely differently, but I'm curious if that's something that you'd be interested in learning more about. If it is, again, leave it in the comments, and I'll definitely consider it. But there's no such thing as a bad market. There's no such thing as a bad economy. There's no such thing as me victimizing myself. There's always a solution, and it starts with a decision to change, period. And so that's my invitation for you. If you want to change, make that decision and then get into action immediately, because there's tons of content out there.
And part of that decision is aligning with your mindset of agreeing that anything's possible if you are willing to take the steps to make them possible.
Yeah. Yeah, buddy. Well, listen, this is way longer than I thought it was going to be.
We'll go over
Hour.
the numbers on the next one. We'll go over the numbers on the next one.
That's it. All right. So you heard it here first. Since they moved to Florida, everything has gotten worse.
Yeah.
Up until it got better. So let's go.
Yeah. Honestly, guys, things have not gotten worse. I mean, for us, I think for most of the people here, uh, if you were to go around in my community and do a survey, that's probably going to be the consensus. If you listen to the media, the mainstream, the folks out there who want your money and want your votes, then yeah, everything's gotten worse. Follow them if you want things to get better. Subscribe to them if you want things to get better. Vote for them if you want things to get better. But I mean, honestly, really and truly, I'd love to see the comments on this video of people's opinion because I don't really believe that things have gotten worse. I think that we have to be more innovative. We have to be better educated. We have to be stronger. We have to be driven. But I wouldn't say that things have gotten worse. We got to step our game up.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, with that in mind, let's wrap this up. Please subscribe to the channel if you found it valuable. Leave your comments on Twitter. Check out Kevin at Kevin247. And check out my next video because I suspect you'll love it a lot. And until next time, peace.